Hola a todos. I would like to thank you all for joining us today to our bi-monthly career seminar series, Latinos, Hispanics in STEM. I'm Delay Hernandez. I'm a senior research scientist with the Center for Education Integrating Mathematics, Science, and Computer SEISMIC. I'm going to be serving today as the event moderator, and we have a very special guest with us today. We have our very own president, Ángel Cabrera. I'm sure that you're all very excited to hear President Cabrera share his experience and stories with us today. For those of you who may not be familiar with the series and are joining us for the first time, this seminar series is a collaboration between three groups at Georgia Tech. One of them is the Latino Organization of Graduate Students, LOGRAS, the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and the GoSTEM program. Our events take place twice a month on the first and the third Tuesday of every month. And we just started, running them this fall, but we hope that we can continue, in the future with this event. So we always have a lot of participants, and we're very excited that we have people come back and listen from our speakers. And usually what we do is that we have an invited speakers from Latino or Hispanic heritage and a STEM field. They come and they talk about their career path, and they have a conversation about what it is to be a Latino in their fields. And then we give an opportunity for the students or the audiences to ask them some questions. Like I said before, today's speaker is a very special member of our community. Dr. Ángel Cabrera is Georgia Tech's 12th president. He came to GT in September 2019 after serving for 7 years as president of George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Under his leadership for the past year, thousands of members of Georgia Tech community, including students, have been contributing to the new 10-year strategic plan that is going to be launched actually this month. The plan is grounded on new mission statements that reaffirms Georgia Tech commitment to developing leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. And the first value listed is that students are our top priority. President Cabrera earned his master and PhD in cognitive psychology from Georgia Tech, which he attended as a Fulbright scholar. He also holds a telecommunications engineering degree from Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. He has published extensively in academic journals and has been featured or quoted in leading media around the world. He's married to management scholar and Georgia Tech classmate Elizabeth. Their son Alex is a recent Georgia Tech graduate and currently a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University. And their daughter Amelia is a senior at Harvard University. Dr. Cabrera is the first native of Spain to actually serve as president of an American university. So without further ado, I leave you with President Cabrera.
Oye, muchísimas gracias, Delay, por la presentación y encantadísimo de estar con todos vosotros esta tarde. I'm really delighted to be here. Mira, es tan especial este momento que alguien me recordó hoy que me estoy perdiendo el partido del Real Madrid contra el Inter, para que veáis lo importante que es este momento. Pero bueno, creo que me dicen que el Real Madrid va ganando, o sea que estamos bien. We're doing this in English, right, Delay?
Yes,
this is Is this our official language? Very good. Well, okay. Well, is it?
I'm sorry.
Yes, we're doing this in English, right?
Yes, we're doing it in English.
Very good. Okay. Well, I'm delighted to do it in English, and then when we get to Q&A, you can ask me in whatever language suits you, as long as it's one that I understand. So really, let me maybe, since I guess as much as some people try to put all things Hispanic under in one category, of course, we all know that there is an immense diversity of backgrounds and experiences in the Hispanic community in the U.S. and of course at Georgia Tech as well. So it might be just fun to share a little bit more detail about my own path and how I ended up here, in addition to sort of the brief highlights from Delay. But I grew up in Madrid, in the great city of Madrid, and I grew up in in a just normal working class neighborhood in the outskirts of Madrid. My parents did not go to college. But there was always this big sense at home that studying and was a top priority for my brothers and myself. So I went to our engineering school in Madrid, the Universidad Politécnica, and I never in a million years. I mean, I thought I was lucky enough to be going to college, something that was not possible for my parents for a variety of reasons. Mostly their time, I mean, higher education was really reduced for very few people in the country. And all of a sudden, my generation was the first generation in Spain where access was really much more open. And by the way, it corresponded with the transition in Spain to a modern democracy. As it turns out, dictators don't like investing in education too much. They would rather keep people not too well informed. So with the transition to democracy, Spain invested, and I was one of the beneficiaries. Now, again, going to college was already a big enough deal for me. I would have never, ever imagined that I have the opportunity to study in one of the great American research universities. But in college, I learned about the Fulbright Scholarship. I learned about some faculty members who had that opportunity years before me, and they encouraged me to apply, and I did. And little did I knew, I end up, I landed in Atlanta with a couple of suitcases and ready to pursue a doctorate in the U.S. The experience at Georgia Tech was transformative in many ways, and by the way, I combined. I had a group of friends, of Hispanic friends from very different backgrounds. I mean, Mexico, Argentina, Puerto Rico. I mean, we had a very diverse group, and yet there was something powerful in our culture and the language that bound us together. So I had like two universes, right? I had my world of colleagues in my doctoral program, none of whom spoke a word of Spanish, and then a more diverse group of Hispanic friends in various departments at Georgia Tech. I met my wife in my department program, and she knew she didn't know a word of Spanish when we met. But somehow the Southern belle, who was never going to leave the South, decided to marry a Spaniard, and after Georgia Tech, we moved to Spain. Our two children, Alex and as you heard, who eventually would come to Georgia Tech, and Emilia, were born in Madrid. They grew up until 7 and 5, and even when we moved to the U.S., we traveled back and forth. We're a bilingual family. We speak Spanish at home as much as well. We switch back and forth like many of you you do. So I've come to also to appreciate very much the value of multiculturalism and how much it enriches the lives of people who have been blessed with it. Even though sometimes in the U.S. that there's a tendency to sort of maybe look down on bilingualism or multiculturalism, especially by people who haven't had the experience. I say that this is one of the big treasures that are given to us when you're blessed to have access to different cultures. It's just absolutely a wonderful gift. So anyway, that when we went back to Spain, it turns out that I ended up very soon, at a very early age, I ended up being dean of a business school in Spain, Instituto de Empresas. Some of you may know it. In the last few years, really, it's become one of the most recognized business schools in Europe, and really, what probably the biggest reason why I had access to positions of leadership early on was precisely because I had that multicultural experience. Instituto de Empresa at the time was an institution that had aspirations to become much more international. It was well known in Spain and parts of Latin America, but not so much in the rest of Europe and in other parts of the world. And I was someone who could build that bridge, if you will. So I realized that, again, being a bridge across cultures at times can be just a wonderful tool and a wonderful asset that sometimes we don't give sufficient value to, or we may not have sufficiently appreciate. So even when I came back to the U.S., was to run an international school of business in Arizona, which is now part of Arizona State University. At the time, it was independent. It was the Thunderbird School of International Management. Once again, it is very rare for an American institution of higher education to go and recruit a leader outside of the U.S. It has happened just a few times, but in this case, once again, it was the fact that I believe, I mean, in my own self-assessment, it was the fact that I had that ability to bridge cultures that became an attractive feature for a school that really focused on multicultural education and international education. So it's been sort of a defining aspect of my life to be able to straddle two cultures. It's a part of my career. It's a part of my family, and something that I really cherish. I am very interesting, of course, being a sort of an American by choice, and being a Hispanic, having a Hispanic background in the U.S. Of course, it's always very interesting situation. Sometimes I think that there is a sort of an association of things Hispanic and Latin as with immigration. Like there's an immediate association of things Hispanic with immigration, and sure enough, many of us are immigrants, and I'm proud to be. I'm proud to be an immigrant, and I'm proud of what immigrants bring to this country. But I think a part of that is left out in that sort of interpretation is the fact that Hispanic culture is older than the country itself. It's older than the United States, isn't it? That while some of us may be and are indeed immigrants, Hispanic culture is not a new thing to this country. That this country actually, the geographies that are now make up this great nation spoke Spanish before they spoke English or German or other European languages, and that there have been Hispanics and Hispanic culture in the United States from before this was a country. So I think there is something that the Hispanic community, I hope one day will take full pride of, and to realize that Hispanic culture has made major contributions to the building of this great nation, just like other cultures have as well. You've heard about the work since I came back full circle to Georgia Tech in 2019. You can imagine what an incredible experience that was. Just like I had never imagined that I would ever be able to study in a great American university. I can assure you that when I was here as a grad student, it never crossed my mind, and that one day I would be called to come back and lead it. And I think it's something to think about and to reflect on. Obviously, not only it's a huge sort of incredibly meaningful part of my own career, and you can imagine the significance of that for me. But even from a sort of a broader standpoint, I often think about the fact that these are things that happen in the U.S. and are very hard to see in other parts of the world. And then again, as much as we need to continue to work on equality, and as much as some of you, and I know occasionally you may feel insufficiently maybe appreciated, but on the other hand, I hope everybody has a strong appreciation for what this country and this culture offers. And I don't know, it would be virtually impossible for an immigrant right now, given the systems, to be president of a great university in Spain or in other parts of Europe. It'd be unheard of, and that I think we can take some pride in the fact that we're part of a community where these things can happen. Much as we also need to identify the things that need to change and improve, but that these things can happen. And just the last thing I'll say, and we can then direct the conversation in whatever direction makes sense to you. But this process that Delay mentioned in the introduction about the strategic planning process has been really, really fascinating. I asked the team, I challenged the team when I arrived to see if we could have a few hundred people engaged in the process of putting together a new strategic plan, a new set of dreams for Georgia Tech. And as it turns out, instead of getting a few hundred people, we ended up getting a few thousand people participating in the process. And from that process came, I think, an increased awareness about our sense of purpose, which is something that every organization it's essential for the success of any organization to have a real sense of why do we exist as an organization? Why is the world a better place because Georgia Tech exists? What is it that we would miss if we didn't exist? And those sort of profound answers that emanated from this process have been really just really meaningful. So we now have a new mission statement. We have a better articulation of our values, and we have a set of strategic themes that provide a sense of direction of what we're going to be working on going forward. And some of those themes, I think, should be of great interest to this community, as diverse as this as the Hispanic community is in the U.S. and Georgia Tech. But I think there's some of these themes that probably will resonate with many of you. The idea of course, of connecting globally, right? Of Georgia Tech, which is a proud public university. We're a proud asset of the state of Georgia, and yet we are really a global brand and an institution that attracts talent from around the world, that builds bridges. How can we do more of that? How can we expand that? The idea of expanding access and the realization that many members of the Hispanic community in the United States actually come from modest means, and they face significant obstacles to have access to a top, a quality higher education, and we are holding ourselves accountable to doing a better job at providing more access. And this is not just a sort of a moral imperative, which it is, but it's a very practical imperative as well. If we are convinced, or if we want to make sure that technology helps us address the biggest challenges of our time, we just cannot do that unless we have all the voices at the table. I mean, I've been learning a lot over the past month. I'm reading a book by Georgia Tech professor Ayana Howard, where she wrote a beautiful book about all the biases in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how we've sort of transferring all of our social biases to artificial intelligence. And if we're not aware of that, and if we only have people of some kind, maybe male or white or of a certain culture building technology, we may end up with technology that doesn't serve all of us. So issues of diversity and inclusion, issues of expanding access so that more people can contribute to advancing technology are going to be essential for our future. And then I'll leave you with another piece of that strategic plan, which I'm very, very excited about, which is this idea of inclusive innovation. Everybody, I think, during this process recognizes that Atlanta. By the way, Atlanta, I mean, I had great memories of Atlanta in the 90s when I was a student, but as I came back, it's like, this is a lot better than what I remember. I mean, Atlanta is vibrant, is evolving, Midtown, all the neighborhoods around Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has been a big part of that. And everybody recognizes that Atlanta is sort of on the cusp of becoming this next big hub of innovation and entrepreneurship, of startups. We're not there yet, but we're almost there. We're building our place among those big cities, big centers of innovation. And the big challenge that we have, the opportunity that we have as well, that's what we need to try to work together, to make sure that we're not just the next hub of entrepreneurship, but we're a better hub of entrepreneurship. There have been criticisms and fair criticisms of even the Silicon Valley as being sometimes hostile to women entrepreneurs or to people of color. Can we do better? Can we learn from what others have done, leverage the immense diversity of talent in Atlanta, and become an example of a place where people from all backgrounds, because of what they bring, that they can really contribute to this idea of innovation, entrepreneurship, and creating opportunity for others. So I am jazzed about Georgia Tech. I think this last year, which has been really tough, as you all know, but in a way has also helped highlight the best in Georgia Tech, what Georgia Tech has to offer when things get tough, how our innovation, our science, our technology can really bring about solutions very quickly. He has really shown really the best in our community and has emphasized that all these themes that I just talked about are as important now as they've ever been. So anyway, I'll pause there, and so you can delay. You have a chance to direct this conversation in whatever direction may make sense.
Yes, we usually like to leave a lot of space for students and members of the audience to ask questions. So I encourage everybody to, either type them up in the Q&A or the chat. But I actually have a question for you that has to do with some of your comments about multiculturalism and the strategic planning of GT. You were saying, you were mentioning how you're very excited that there's a lot of issues of diversity and access that are going to be directly addressed by the strategic planning, but you were talking in your personal stories about that the value of multiculturalism, how being exposed to all these groups really was something that was meaningful to you, both personally and professionally. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more in detail about how do you think this plays out in your vision for Georgia Tech in the future?
Sure. Well, I mean, listen, if you think about all the big issues that we face and you can look at the Sustainable Development Goals. That's our sort of our official list of issues that we face as approved by all the governments around the world under the United Nations General Assembly. And most of those issues are not issues that one country or one culture or one group of people can solve. It's just impossible. You take climate change. You cannot say, well, I'm going to, build a wall and protect my own country, and I don't care what you guys do. No, because if you burn fossil fuels, if you emit carbon, if you destroy your forest, you are creating a set of events that will eventually affect Maine. If a virus pops up in a market in a town in the south part of your country, that could become a pandemic that upends the life of all of us. If we misuse natural resources, if we, you go through the list, and our food systems and our ability to deal with hunger and availability of food, our food systems are now global in nature. So any of these problems, any of these big problems, even though they manifest themselves locally, they are global in nature. And you just cannot even begin to try to address any of them if you don't bring people from around the world together. You can, posture, do whatever, but you just simply cannot really resolve anything. So to be able to do that, you need to be able to reach out, to communicate, to build relationships, to build trust with someone else, to be able to say, yeah, we're in this together. Let's sit around the table. Let's figure this out. And you can only do that if you have people who are, who can build those bridges. So for a country like the United States to have people who speak Chinese, who speak Spanish, who speak Arabic, and not only speak the language, but who are very familiar and very comfortable with those cultures, who can build those connections, it's absolutely essential. And it's essential in business because most of the companies that any of you will work for, you will be using resources from multiple parts of the world. You will be selling to customers in different parts of the world. So whether you're in business, whether you're in government, whether you're in a non-for-profit, the ability to connect with people who are different from you is essential. I would argue that if you are one of those individuals who lives, between two cultures, then you probably have an advantage even dealing with a third culture that you don't know. So if I were to find, to send someone, from Georgia, say, try to go to Turkey because we need to do something with Turkey, I would rather send, uh, somebody who's sort of a Mexican American, if you will, than someone who's never left their hometown. Just because I believe that once you've learned to sort of bridge the cultures, somehow it opens you up to others. One of the things that we've done great with, relatively speaking, we've been very strong at Georgia Tech is study abroad. And in the U.S., by the way, the U.S. doesn't do very well in study abroad. Overall, less than 10% of students, and this is pre-COVID, right? Now with COVID, no one travels, but before COVID, less than 10% of graduates of an American institution would have studied abroad. And by the way, we're counting a 2-week trip with a professor to Mexico. That counts. I mean, I'm not even saying spending a whole semester abroad. At Georgia Tech, we have almost 60% of our students do. That is essential, that we keep pushing that we encourage all of our, even students who haven't had that experience of multiculturalism in the family, that somehow we figure out ways for them to have that experience. I think is essential.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Adriana Mulero. She says, great talk, Dr. Cabrera. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wanted to know if there was one specific experience that was key to help you get to your current position.
Well, there've been many. I mean, but as I said, I think overall, sometimes I feel that, and I've seen that even the children of some family friends, and how, I guess, when it is human, right? That even children, or when they're teenagers, and I don't know if some of you have gone through that you hate being different, right? And that you try to fit in. And I have even some friends who's had issues at home because their kids all of a sudden who are bilingual, but they refuse to speak Spanish because it makes them seem different or appear different. And at that time, which I totally get, you just want to fit in. You want to be the same. You don't want to be like singled out as being the other or different. And then as you start sort of growing up, what you realize is that it is your differences that make you special, that give you, it is your superpower is the fact, whatever you have that everybody else has doesn't add much value. It is what makes you, what's different about you that gives you that superpower. In my case, I mean, you can just simply not, I mean, well, each of us looks at our career and you try to make sense out of it. I mean, I guess you can twist it and try to explain things, and no matter what explanation I can come up with my career, you just simply cannot explain it if I had not crossed the ocean after college and come to the U.S. Simply just could not have happened. And as I said, every job that I have had, every opportunity I have had, can be traced back to that, to the fact that I became that sort of connector.
I think that's definitely the case for a lot of people who have had to sort of like go and start a new life somewhere else. It's a pivotal point. There's another.
And it's
There's
not
another
easy, right? You know, it's not easy. It's not easy. In fact, I get it. It's not. It's a lot easier. I mean, I go back to Spain. My college friends, they had more normal lives, and I sometimes, you know, when things get complicated, I look at them sometimes with some envy, right? It's like, gosh, life would have been so easy, which it's not. I mean, everybody has issues, but it is. I mean, to go to pack up to land in a different culture. I mean, it is hard, and yet when you go through the process, just the wealth that it creates in your life is amazing. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but you're completely right. I mean, and you changed so much. I remember I go back to Cuba and I feel so different from, you know, like my friends. Although my friends really, to be completely honest, being Cuban, they're all spread all over the world.
Hmm.
And sometimes I wonder, is it that we have grown old and mature, or is it that we're just so different based on our experiences that they're, you know,
Right.
so
Well,
completely divergent?
that's right. And then what happens also, which by the way, I was warned when I was coming to the U.S. and I went to my sort of orientation with Fulbrighters, Spanish Fulbrighters who had come to the U.S. and then returned, and they were maybe teaching at Spanish universities or doing whatever. They told me something that I really thought they were just, I don't know, pulling my leg. I mean, I thought, no, this that makes no sense. They said coming back to Spain was harder than going to the US. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because you know, you're coming home to you know your food, your culture, you understand all the things now make sense as opposed to all the things that are so hard when you're and sure enough, when I went to Spain after Georgia Tech, I was like, damn it, they were right. They were right. Because all of a sudden when you leave your home you learn a lot about your home, right? You now question things about where you come from and you look at the world differently. And then you return home and you've gone through all that experience, but others haven't. Their life has continued. So it just creates a set of personal conflicts that are just hard to explain if you haven't gone through it, but they were right.
And a bit of a sense of displacement because, you know, you sort of like belong there, but you don't quite belong there anymore the same way, right?
Right,
So it's like,
right. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and you belong to your new country, but you kind of like not completely belong to that new country, especially if it's like a difference of culture, which most times it
That's right.
is.
Right. I mean, I'm still have a, you know, when I'm in the U.S. I mean, again, I'm an American citizen. I have an important job and all that, but I still have a Spanish name, which is different. I have an accent when I speak, so I'm always like a little bit different here. And when I'm in Spain, I'm el americano. And I was like, wait a second, what do you mean americano? I'm Spanish as the tortilla de patatas, and you know, but yeah, now you're now different. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you think that in the United States it would be the place where you had to constantly negotiate that identity. But then back home, you still had to then negotiate the identity, but just like in a different way with your
that's right.
family and from childhood.
That's
So
exactly
it's
right.
not an easy
Yeah.
There's a question from Wilson Espinosa. I think he has a question similar to the one from Adriana, but a little bit more specific. He says, Dr. Cabrera, what do you think you did as a student to succeed at your current career path? Any particular experience, class, or student leadership position?
Um, so, well, one of maybe actually it probably has to do more with this conversation about multiculturalism. So my first year at Georgia Tech, I went through my culture shock like everybody else, right? I mean, even when you say no, I'm never going to have a culture shock. I'm the most open-minded person in the galaxy, and you know, it's uh, when you go somewhere else, you go through that process. It's hard. It's hard. All of a sudden, you don't fully understand what's going on, or you know. So I would go out with my classmates who are all American, and I would not understand the jokes or the cultural references. It was hard. And I ended up sort of, again, building this group of Hispanic friends, very diverse, but it was comfortable. It was sort of like after a week of classes and work and research, I would go to Fidencio's house in Home Park, and we would open a bottle of tequila and play dominoes, and just, it was like, it was like this sort of sense of relief and it's like, okay. And then I very soon I started realizing, hey, I love these guys, I love this group, but I didn't come this far to sort of be, stay in this ghetto. So I really made the the conscious decision that is like, I need to work in getting to understand this culture, the home culture. This is where I've come. So I ended up spending a lot of time with my classmates. Well, I kind of got carried away because I spent so much time trying to understand the natives that I married one. And by the way, then I think once I say, okay, I have to crack this nut, after I felt like, okay, I think I'm now much more comfortable. Then actually I sort of mixed the two worlds, and Beth, who eventually learned Spanish, you just like got to know all these guys. So anyway, so it's not so much a leadership position. It was sort of which I've always been drawn to leadership positions for reasons that I don't fully understand, but I guess that must be a personality issue. But probably the most transformative things that I went was this sort of conscious effort of saying, I need to get to understand, to feel comfortable with this new culture that I've embedded. And I honestly, I think that probably was the most transformative process. The second thing that was very, very helpful in my own trajectories as I was an engineer when I studied engineering in Spain. I was in electrical and computer engineering. Telecomunicación in Spain refers to this sort of electrical and computer. And I switched radically to psychology when I came to Georgia Tech. It was one of those sort of identity crises. Anyway, it's a long story, but my old professors in Spain thought I had lost my mind. My mom thought I had lost my mind. But anyway, I switched anyways. And at times, I mean, I loved it, but I also thought maybe I did lose my mind. What am I doing? But over time, it turns out that my sort of crazy career, where I did engineering and psychology and ended up teaching business and all that, all of a sudden, and I never prepared it for this, right? I mean, things end up, but when I became a college president, it was my other superpower, that I could talk to the social scientists, I could talk to the engineers, I could talk to the business faculty and fit right in. So I realized that I was not just a sort of a cultural bridge, but also a disciplinary bridge.
I think that's a great answer, because it's so important in today's world to sort of like have a broader view of the issues and how they connect to each other. Sometimes our disciplines are extremely specialized, especially, within STEM and science. But if you can have sort of like that more global view and see how they connect to social issues and the humanities and these other fields, there's an advantage in being able to be sort of at the crossroads of these connections. There's another question from Juan. It says, President Cabrera, thank you for your time. Can you share an instance when you had a setback or a major challenge in your career, and how do you get through it?
Oh, it's an endless list of those, and maybe, I mean, I'm hesitating, not because it's hard to find one, is to choose one of the many setbacks, but indeed, I mean, again, in retrospect, when I look at them, those are the moments when you grow. I mean, they're painful as heck, but those are the moments. I'll give you one. I came to the U.S., so I was for a whole bunch of accidents, I became dean of this business school in Spain in my early 30s, which was fairly very, very unusual. And then I was recruited by Thunderbird. And again, I mean, I was just crazy because the American universities recruiting a foreigner. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big deal for me. It was a big deal in general. And I arrived, and the school that I came to had financial issues. I was fully aware of them, but also they had sort of raised a pretty major contribution from an alum. And so when I accepted the job, it was with full knowledge that, yeah, we have issues. We're going to have to work very hard. But I had this big gift that had been raised. A few months into after I arrived in my job, it became clear that money from that gift was never going to come. And it was, I had packed up my family, moved everybody, the kids, sold my house. I mean, this was like, we really like moved across the ocean for this. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was severe. I mean, it was a very difficult business situation. There were, livelihoods at risk for many, many people. I mean, it was really tough. It was very tough. And I remember at the time where I had a wonderful chairman of the board who was a very experienced business executive, and he would listen to me on the phone when I was sort of freaking out. I don't think there's another way to describe it. I mean, I was really, really concerned about, oh my God, and he would listen to me and how I was. And he always would say, I know it's going to be, you're not going to believe me now, but one day you look back and you'll be glad you went through this. I'm like, you're right. I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all. This is hell. I don't want to go through this. It's like, he's absolutely right. I mean, I learned so much. I grew by leaps and bounds in my own leadership by just going through. It is situations like that. I mean, this year, COVID has been that for many people. It has been that for me too. I mean, it has tested me like it has tested all of us. And I honestly and truthfully believe this is not, this is actually absolutely believe that we will all be better off because of this. It is when you get tested, when you're resilient, when you're, that you learn that you have to get resources from places you didn't know you had, and that's what makes you better. That's what makes you stronger. But it is a long list of that.
Yeah, this pandemic did not leave you a lot of time to get, sort of like comfortable at Georgia Tech or even back in Atlanta. It was like, here you go.
No, I had a wonderful like sort of honeymoon. I thought it's like maybe I'll get a 1 year. I had a great honeymoon. I arrived September 1st, and until like January and February, it was absolutely wonderful. And then all hell broke loose in March. But
I agree with you. I think that difficult times sort of test our resilience, but also sort of like you give us an opportunity to grow and build strengths that we sometimes don't even know we had. And for what matters, I think my personal opinion is that I'm extremely proud of the work that our university has been doing during this difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's a question from Nina. This one is a little bit about your family. She says, thank you for your time, Dr. Cabrera. On the topic of multiculturalism in the household, I was wondering how you handled that with your own family. That is, raising your kids in the U.S. in a multicultural household. How did you and your wife do so your kids could learn from both of their backgrounds and culture?
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. In fact, I did some research when I was at Georgia Tech. For one of my classes, I did research on bilingualism. I interviewed lots of graduate students who were from other countries, and I learned a lot about even language development and so on. So I was fascinated. So my kids, first of all, they were born in Spain, so we always spoke English at home because my wife Beth and I met in English, and as you know, but there's a word for that, by the way. You know how when you develop a relationship with someone in a language, it's almost impossible to sort of switch to another language, you feel weird, right? It's called, it's sort of like you have a native language. This is called a connatural language. That's a lesson for the day. Connatural language, sort of like the native language for a pair, for two people instead of for one. So our connatural language was English, right? But the kids, very soon, as you know, if you have kids, the language of the place becomes dominant. So they spoke in Spanish with everybody else, school, everybody, all the friends, but English at home. And it was very weird. I remember, walking through downtown Madrid with my, 5-year-old son, and we would be in Puerta del Sol. I'm from Madrid, he's from Madrid, and we're speaking in English, even though, we're both native Spanish speakers, but that's how it worked. And then when we came to the U.S., and Beth, my wife Beth, even though she and I always spoke in English, she learned Spanish. She became a professor at a Spanish university, so she was fluent. She spoke in Spanish with everybody else, but we continued in English. When we moved to the U.S., we decided, although it didn't work, we decided, okay, we're now going to switch. We're now going to do Spanish at home because English is going to become dominant very quickly. Sure enough, the kids within months, they were now dominant in English. So Spanish became weaker. So we tried, and it's been a kind of a mess. And then and then I realized I've tried to figure out ways for them to keep their Spanish going in schools, but it's been hard. It's been hard. So we used our travel. We're fortunate that we can afford to travel. So we would go to Spain every summer, and I mean that's how they've kept it up. So now they're beautifully, they're bilingual, and they make fun of their mother's Spanish. They make fun of my English, because for them it's just beautiful when some of you guys have grown up in that circumstance, right? But when you grow up bilingual, it's just natural for you. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's right there in the middle. I remember I once brought my kid, we were in Cuba and we were in this bus, and the guy is saying something in Spanish, and then he stops and then he starts saying it in English. And my son, who was younger, looks at me and is like, why is he repeating it? And I was like, oh, you just don't realize that he's speaking the language.
We have had that exact experience in the airport in Spain, where they would say whatever, your flight is about to depart, and then they would repeat it in English.
Yeah.
And our son would say, why do they have to say everything twice? It's beautiful how the mind.
They changed the language. They didn't notice, but they did.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions I have to do actually with Georgia Tech. I'm going to refer to one that is on the Q&A. It says, when people, including at GT, talk about minorities, the spotlight often goes to Blacks and African Americans. We love the Black community, but Latinos shouldn't be neglected. What can be done to create and increase awareness that Latinos are also minorities and often affected by some of the same issues?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So there's a history in Atlanta and in Georgia, the South, that we need to be aware of, right? I mean, there are very, very deep ingrained issues in our city that have not been resolved, and there are numbers. I mean, Atlanta is more than half Black, and still you have less than 7% of our students are Black. It's been a struggle. So I think there's something unique about the struggle of African Americans in the South, Georgia, and Atlanta that is inevitably is going to be at the forefront of what we do. And I make no apologies about that. I mean, I really think that sort of Georgia Tech has to play a role in that because of our history and our context. And yet, the good news is that even if that is the driving force, it's not the only driving force. When we talk about expanding access, we're not saying we're just going to expand access for this group. I mean, we're talking. But the reality is when you look at, okay, what do you need to do to expand access? what do you need to do to build a more inclusive community where everybody can feel belonging and everybody can thrive? If you crack those issues, even if the driving force is for all those reasons is the African American community, if you crack those issues, you've automatically made Georgia Tech better for Hispanics, better for other minorities, because the interventions are the same. I mean, listen, for example, Seismic and the work that Seismic does with the public university systems. Well, if you build better bridges with the public universities in Atlanta, automatically you're also building bridges with all the Hispanic kids in those schools, right? If you raise more money for need-based scholarships to deal with the issues that are not exclusively those issues of financial access are not exclusive to the African American community. If you create a bigger pool, automatically you're now making things easier for other minorities. If you change the culture so the culture is far more open, you're immediately making so I think it is okay if we embrace again, it's not, as you read the strategic plan, is not just focused on African Americans, but it's okay if that is sort of a big driving force. This is going to make us better regardless for everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you're correct. We do a lot of meaningful work at Seismic with a lot of local schools that impact a lot of the students in there. And I think that, like you said, if you go to areas where there's a lot of need, all the students in those areas get benefits from Georgia Tech being involved and having programs that have them in mind. There's another GT-related question from Vito Rodriguez. He says, thanks for your time today, Dr. Cabrera. Could you expand on inclusive innovation at GT? If students have ideas for new programs to increase diversity at GT, what is the path you suggest to propose them?
Well, I think the two sides to that question. First of all, we have created, for the first time, actually, I was surprised that it didn't exist already, but it didn't. We now have an institute-wide council on diversity and inclusion that we just set up. We have invited members from a whole different set of backgrounds is going to be meeting for the first time, I think, now in November. And so there's going to be a natural place. Vice President Archie Urban is leading the charge, so he's a very immediate person. Contact Archie with your ideas, but there is going to be a place, a group of people dedicated to that. So to gather data, to keep track of whether or not we're doing better, both in terms of numbers. I mean, are we recruiting more Black and Hispanic students? Are we recruiting and advancing more minority faculty members, more women in engineering? So we're going to keep track of that, but also whether we need to do to assess our culture. They're going to be looking at all that. So I think there is a channel. It was very important for me that we had to create at least the mechanism, the group, the formal process to deal with this, to act on this. So that I think we're on a good path. But the idea of inclusive innovation has to do also with how do we empower entrepreneurs of all backgrounds in Atlanta. So for example, we have CreateX, where Georgia Tech students can sign up for CreateX and they learn how to build a new company, and some of them indeed end up building a new company. So we're working with other actors in Atlanta to try to find out, okay, what specific programs we need to do to make sure that that everybody who is creative, who has that bug of creating something, can do it. So we're going to be working on that area as well.
That sounds very exciting, especially for the students, for them to have an opportunity to actually have these very formal channels to connect with. There's a question from Jorge Breton. It says, Dr. Cabrera, thank you for sharing your story, very inspiring. What has been the most satisfying aspect of your job at GT so far, and the biggest frustration?
So I have many more satisfactions than frustrations, but one that probably has elements of both is COVID. So obviously COVID has been tough. Um, the summer has been tough, especially when people were students, parents, employees, faculty, staff. There was a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen. People were nervous. A lot of social media, press, people. I mean, it was tough, and it was a very hard situation. It was affecting not just us as an institution, but each of us personally and in our families. And yet COVID, which is probably, the biggest source of frustrations or the biggest, issue that we've had to deal with, has also been an amazing way to bring out the best in people. So to have folks from day one who said, "How do I help?" People step up, whether it's folks in mechanical engineering when they heard, "Okay, we don't have sufficient personal protective equipment." Okay, we'll design it, and they went to the lab and they designed these things, and they tested them with users in local hospitals, and they found manufacturers in Georgia to try to produce thousands and thousands of these things. Or they said, "We don't have respirators, we'll make them." And I mean, the biggest thing is this whole testing system, which we've put together, which is entirely faculty driven. Then we said, okay, we need to test everybody every week. It's like, well, that's crazy. We've never done that. We don't have medical school. We don't do clinical tests. And the faculty said, well, we'll figure it out. Like, well, yeah, but if you start sticking people with swabs up their noses, they're not coming back every week because they're not. And it's like, well, it's okay. We'll do a saliva-based. Well, but there's no saliva-based approved test by the FDA. It's okay. We'll make one up. I mean, just to see the faculty figure this out and develop the systems and create all the, get the robots, and it's been just absolutely unbelievable. And then to see the students step up. I know that I've seen many universities just complain about their students. I've been amazed about how the students have stepped up and how voluntarily, they show up and they get tested and they promote this, and I mean, honestly, is one of those things that I think, again, back to the earlier conversation, we're going to look back and we'll know that we're better because we went through this.
Yeah, our community has definitely come together in a really, really impressive way at this difficult time. And I think our results show for it. I think we definitely can see the results of this effort. So thank you so much, President Cabrera, for joining us today. I know, you're taking time out of your extremely busy schedule on election day, and you missed the game. I'm going to do it.
Apparently we're winning, so that's fine.
Okay. I was going to wish luck to the Real Madrid, but if it's winning, they don't need it.
Well, I don't think that the game is over yet, so let's hope they keep it up. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone.
No, I would just want to thank you. I know before you close it, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for leading this just great conversation. Y un saludo y muy cariñoso y un abrazo a todos.
Muchas gracias. Realmente se lo agradecemos. And I wanted to also thank everybody from the planning committee, the students, and Dr. Macedo for, all the staff from CE, Seismic, and the President Office for their invaluable help. And to everybody for coming today and joining us. I hope that you will join us too again on November 17. That's the last talk of the fall semester. And our next speaker is Dr. Marvi Matos. She's the Director of Engineering and Design Practices at the Boeing Company. As usual, you can feel free to email any of us in the committees if you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas. We welcome your feedback. And I'm actually going to put in the chat right now the information about our website where you can find the upcoming information for our next event. So thank you so much. I apologize if I didn't have time to get to your questions, but I hope that you have a wonderful end of your day and that you enjoy this amazing conversation with President Cabrera. Thank you, everybody.